Okay, so a smartphone manufacturer wants to determine the average battery time that its new smartphone will get. How do you figure that out? Well, the manufacturer will test 100 smartphones, match the strategies to their corresponding sampling techniques. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we're analyzing different ways of collecting data. So whenever they want to figure something out statistically, they have some options for how they collect the data. There's some better ways and worse ways, more difficult and more helpful ways. And so we're going to analyze those right here. So you understand what the question is saying. Somebody who made a smartphone wants to determine the average battery time. How do they do that? When they tell us, when you buy a new smartphone, then they'll tell you the average battery time. How do they know? Well, they test it, don't they? They do alpha testing and beta testing. They have people try it out, don't they? Well, how do they set up the test? Well, they use statistics. They carefully designed statistical studies. And so here's some different ways that they could have done that. First off, they could say the manufacturer asks 100 of her friends who have the phone if she can borrow their phones to test. So that's one way. Is that a good way? No, that's not a very good way. That's called, when you do something
convenience.
Yeah, that's convenience, exactly. This one is convenience. That's just doing what's easy. And why is that not a good idea? I mean, it's not, easy isn't automatically bad. Why is that bad? Well, the problem is you're not going to get at the truth, probably. What do I mean? Well, it's kind of like, it's kind of like social media today, how people are talking about we all tend to live in our echo chambers and we surround ourselves with people that think like we think. And so if all you ever do is talk to people that think just like you think, you're not going to really find out what's really out there. Well, in the same way, that's the case with this phone test. If all she does is get her friends and find out the average battery life for all of her friends, her friends are probably like her. Whatever that means. Maybe she's a intense phone user and she uses her phone like crazy all day long. And so she burns through the battery life real quick. Well, her friends are probably similar. I mean, we tend to hang out with people like us. And so, so maybe they all going to come up with a really low battery life because they're all people that just burn through their phone like crazy all day long. Maybe. I don't know. Or maybe they're people that never use their phone. Whatever. They're going to be like each other. And so you're not going to get a very good random value. Random should be average for everybody in the world, not just everybody of a certain type, right? So do you see why convenient sampling won't really get you to the truth? It won't really get you to the average battery life for the phone. It's just going to get you just people like her, which is not the average for everybody. So that's not a very good way to do statistics. Not if you want the truth, and that is the point of statistics, is we're trying to find out the truth. All right, so that's the first thing. That was convenience. So we'll check that box off. Next, it says the manufacturer uses a computer to randomly select 150 smartphone serial numbers and tests all 150 phones with these serial numbers. What do you think that is?
Systematic or random?
Yeah, that's going to be that's the simple random.
Simple random, yeah.
Yeah, simple random. Because they just randomize numbers. And that's a good way. That's a really good way. That way, the 150 phones are totally random people. They're not all people of one type or another type. They're just random. You're going to get all the different types mixed in there. So you're going to really get to the truth. That's a good way to do a statistical study. That way you get the truth. The people that use their phones more and less, and they're all mixed in at random until you get to the real average battery life for this phone, which is what you're trying to get at, the truth, right? So simple random is a good way to go. What about the next one? A manufacturer tests 20 smartphones from each of its 5 equally sized distributors. So it's got 5 different distributors, like people that, sell the phone, 5 different stores or whatever. And it grabs 20 from each of those. Now, what's that called? That is stratified. That's probably the weirdest one. Write that here. Stratified. That's stratified. And what that means, stratified, strata are layers. They talk about the strata of geology, the layers of rock formation. So strata are layers. So basically, stratified sampling is when you break into groups of the same type. That's a good way to sample. They do that when they poll, for example, like again, like I said, right now they're trying to figure out about the recall election in California. So when they do polling, what they do is they will, they'll ask a certain number of men, a certain number of women, a certain number of old people, young people, this race, that race, you know, people live in the city, the country, rich, poor. So they break up into groups, and that's called stratified sampling. And that's a good way to go, because that way you get all the different kinds of people in your survey. And you tend to get to the truth, because you get the average for every type of person, which is the real average. That's a good way to do statistics as well. Stratified. Okay, the next one, the manufacturer tests every 1,000th smartphone that comes off the assembly line. Well, that is systematic. That's just a system. And that's not bad either. Because they're using a system. Right? Their system is every 1,000th phone coming off the line, we're just going to grab it and test it. That's a system. That's good. And then the last one, we've only got one left. Manufacturer finds 3 small communities that have dry, moderate, and humid climates, and every smartphone from each of these 3 communities is tested. So I guess the humidity is going to affect the battery life too. I didn't even think about that. That makes sense. So anyway, this one's hard to tell. It's very similar to stratified. Obviously, we've only got one option left, so we know what it is. It's cluster. But how would we have known if we'd started with it? Let me write it first off. It's cluster. Cluster. Think about like a group of grapes. Think about grapes, right? Grapes come in clusters, right? And so in grapes, you grab all in a section in various sections. These are very close and similar. Honestly, I'm probably not going to push you hard on the exam to this difference. It's very, very similar. Cluster and stratified, they're very, very similar. The only difference, the key word that would help you here is every. That's the all right there. That's the key idea. So when you eat grapes, right, you get a whole cluster of grapes. That's the idea with cluster sampling. You break it up, because what's hard, stratified and cluster are both very similar. In both cases, you break them up into groups, but in the cluster case, you grab all in the various groups. Whereas in the stratified, we just grabbed 20 from each of the 5, not all. See that difference? So there we go.